The stars were silent, but silence in space did not mean peace. It only meant that signals took time to travel. And one signal, one desperate cry for help, was racing across the void faster than light itself, carried by powerful quantum relays that the Eliari people had activated as their last hope. The Eliari were not a warrior race. Their homeworld was gentle, filled with oceans that shone like crystal and forests that sang when the winds moved through them. For thousands of years they had lived in peace, building cities of glass and light, trading knowledge with their neighbors and sending explorers to distant star systems. They were a people of art and wisdom, not battle and steel. But peace had ended when the swarm came. The swarm was mechanical, a tide of machines that devoured everything in their path. Planets once alive with green forests were now fields of ash. Stars that had once been safe for colonies were now traps, with swarm drones waiting to consume whatever ships arrived. The Eliari had lost 2 colonies already, each filled with millions of their people. Their fleets had been torn apart, their defense stations shredded like paper. Now, the swarm moved toward Eliara Prime itself, their homeworld. The High Council gathered in the Hall of Starlight, the most sacred place in their capital city. The hall's ceiling was a dome of transparent crystal, and through it the stars seemed to shine down with cold indifference. Counselor Serenia stood before the others, her silver eyes filled with worry. "We have sent the signal," she said softly. "It will spread beyond our neighbors, beyond even the central alliances. It will go to any corner of the galaxy where someone might listen." Another counselor, an elder named Ocean, shook his head. "And who will answer?" The Veiri turned away. The Chaldon refused. Even the Council of 12 ignored our plea. "No one will risk their fleets against the swarm. We are alone." Serenia's voice trembled, but she kept her composure. Better to try than to die in silence. The chamber fell quiet. All they could do now was wait and hope. Far away on the edge of a different star cluster, a human ship floated in the black. The ship was the Resolute, a heavy cruiser of the Deathworlder fleet. Humans did not call themselves Deathworlders, but that was the name the galaxy had given them. Humanity came from Earth, a planet considered by other species to be nearly unlivable. Earth had wild storms, shifting climates, dangerous predators, diseases, and a gravity higher than what most aliens considered safe. Yet humanity had not only survived, it had thrived. They had spread into space, carrying their resilience with them. To the wider galaxy, humans were unpredictable, reckless, and sometimes terrifying. But when disaster struck, humans had a strange habit of running toward the danger instead of away. On the bridge of the Resolute, Captain Ryan Holt leaned back in his chair as alarms beeped across the consoles. His officers were already checking the strange signal that had suddenly appeared on their receivers. "What do we have, Ensign?" Holt asked, his deep voice calm but curious. Ensign Mira, her short hair glowing blue in the light of her screen, frowned. "It's an SOS, Captain. Origin Eliari system. Message code is ancient, but translation is clear. They're calling for help. From anyone." "Anyone?" Holt raised an eyebrow. "Not directed to allies or trade partners?" "No, sir. It's a wide broadcast. A desperation call." Commander Jex, the ship's tactical officer, snorted. "That's suicide. If the swarm is there, no sane fleet would touch it. Whoever they are, they're finished." The bridge grew quiet. Everyone had heard stories of the swarm. Even humans, reckless as they were, preferred to keep distance from that nightmare. But Holt kept his gaze on the signal, watching as lines of Eliari speech scrolled across his screen, translated into Standard. The words were simple but powerful. "We are Eliari. We seek aid. The swarm consumes our worlds. If no one helps us, we will vanish, please. If there is any mercy left in the stars, hear us." The silence on the bridge felt heavier now. Mira lowered her voice. "Captain, should I clear the signal and mark it as unreachable?" Holt leaned forward, his eyes hard. "No," Jex gave him a sharp look. "Captain, with respect, that's madness. You know what the swarm does. Entire fleets larger than ours have been erased. Why throw ourselves into the fire?" "Because," Holt said, his voice steady, "if we don't, who will? The Eliari sent this to the stars knowing no one would come. We're the ones who heard it. That makes it our choice. And I, for one, am not going to ignore a cry for help." The crew exchanged glances. Some were uneasy, others inspired. Deathworlders had a reputation for taking risks that no one else would. Some called it bravery. Others called it recklessness. But all of them knew that Holt was not the kind of captain to turn his back on the helpless. Set a course for the Eliari system, Holt ordered. Aye, Captain, Mira said, her voice firm now. The Resolute was not alone. A fleet of 12 ships followed it, destroyers, carriers, and smaller frigates, each one hardened from battles with pirates, raiders, and even other galactic powers. Together, they formed a force not large by galactic standards, but dangerous in ways other fleets could not match. Human fleets did not fight with elegance. They fought with creativity, with stubbornness, and with a refusal to quit. As the fleet shifted course, engines burning bright, whispers spread through the crew. The Eliari were strangers. Their worlds were far away. Their survival meant little to human politics or trade. But that did not matter. What mattered was the signal, the plea that had pierced the darkness of space and touched the hearts of Deathworlders. For humans, it was enough. Back on Eliara Prime, Serenia stood on a balcony overlooking the Crystal City. The night sky was beautiful, filled with stars, but to her every point of light felt like a silent witness to their doom. She closed her eyes, wondering if her people's message had vanished into nothing. Then her communicator chimed. She opened it quickly, and her breath caught when she saw the words displayed. Signal received. Deathworlder fleet en route. Hold fast, her hands trembled. She whispered the words aloud as if saying them would make them real. Deathworlders are coming. Behind her, Counselor Ocean stepped forward, his face pale. Impossible. Why would they come? Why would they risk themselves for us? Serenia turned, her silver eyes burning with hope. Because they are human, and humans do not turn away from fire. For the first time in weeks, a spark of courage spread among the Eliari leaders. They did not know if the Deathworlders could truly defeat the swarm. They did not know if this fleet would even survive the journey. But they knew something vital. They were not alone anymore, and sometimes in the darkest of nights that was enough to change everything. Captain Ryan Holt stood once more on the bridge of the Resolute. His uniform was torn, his face marked with exhaustion, but his eyes still burned with iron resolve. Outside the ship's windows, Eliara Prime glowed faintly, scarred by fire and smoke. Mira's voice cut through the silence. Fleet status report. We've lost nearly half our ships. Ammunition reserves at 30%. Repairs ongoing. Morale, fragile but holding. Commander Jex leaned against the console, his arm in a sling. The swarm hasn't hit us again yet, but they will. This was just one head of the serpent. The true core remains. Holt's gaze hardened. Then we cut out its heart. The Eliari High Council met once again, this time not in fear but in grim determination. Counselor Serenia spoke first. You humans have bled for us more than anyone could ask. But the swarm will come again. If we stay here, they will consume us piece by piece. Tell us, Captain Holt, what is your plan? Holt looked at the gathered leaders. His words were steady, almost cold. We end it. Not by defense. Not by waiting. We take the fight to the core itself. Gasps spread across the chamber. Counselor Ocean shook his head violently. Madness. To strike into the very heart of the swarm is to invite destruction. None will return. But Serenia leaned forward, her silver eyes bright. And yet, if they do not, none of us will survive anyway. Better to strike and fall than wait and wither, Jex added firmly. Humans don't fight wars to survive, Counselor. We fight them to win, silence fell. In that silence, the Eliari felt something change deep inside them. For the first time in centuries, they were not just afraid. They were angry. They wanted to fight. Preparations for the final strike began. Every ship that could fly was armed and reinforced. Every soldier who could stand was given a weapon. Human engineers trained Eliari crews in desperate crash courses, how to reroute power, how to repair hulls in battle, how to fire weapons with precision. The Eliari learned quickly, driven by the fire they saw in the humans. Among the civilians, volunteers rose to carry supplies, build defenses, and even pilot ships. Children whispered new names for the humans. Stormbearers, Firebringers, the shield that bleeds. The Deathworlders had become more than soldiers, they had become symbols. At last, the fleet gathered. Dozens of battered human warships and hundreds of Eliari vessels floated together in orbit, their hulls glowing under repair lights. Many were damaged, many understaffed, but everyone was ready. On the bridge of the Resolute, Holt addressed them all through the fleet-wide comm. His voice carried to every ship, every soldier, every civilian who had joined the cause. We have fought, we have bled, and we have lost. But we have shown the swarm that we will not break. Now we strike at their heart. We may not all return, but if we succeed, the galaxy will live. And if we fall as Death Worlders standing to the last. A chorus of voices thundered back across the channels. To the last. The jump into swarm territory was unlike any before. As the fleet emerged from hyperspace, the true core of the swarm came into view. A colossal structure, black as night, spanning across an entire system. It was not a planet nor a star, but something between. A vast artificial construct pulsing with cold light. Drones swarmed around it like endless clouds. Even the most hardened warriors felt their hearts tighten. It was a sight that spoke of despair, of futility. But Holt simply said, "Target the core. All ships forward." And the Deathworlder fleet roared into battle. The fight that followed shook the stars. Swarm ships poured out in endless tides, larger and stronger than ever before. Human destroyers charged headlong, cannons blazing, while Eliari cruisers darted between them, striking fast and sharp. Explosions lit the void in constant storms of fire. On the ground level of the construct, human and Eliari Marines landed in drop pods, tearing through machine defenses in desperate waves. Their goal was simple: reach the command chamber deep within and plant the final charges. Commander Jex led one of the landing teams. His voice came steady through the comm. "Charges secured. Fighting through heavy resistance. Tell the captain not to wait for me." Mira's voice broke for a moment. "Jex, you're not—" But the line cut with static, drowned out by the roar of battle. Inside the Resolute, alarm screamed. The ship shook as enemy fire tore across its hull. Crew members shouted, sparks flew, but still the vessel pressed forward. "Shield's gone," Mira cried. "We can't take another direct hit." Holt gripped the command chair. "Then we won't. Helm, ram that swarm carrier dead ahead. Full speed." The crew obeyed without hesitation. The Resolute slammed into the massive swarm vessel, tearing through its hull in a storm of fire. For a moment, silence reigned. Then Holt's voice rang out. "All guns, fire everything we have left." The ship's cannons roared, spewing fire into the heart of the enemy until their barrels melted. The carrier exploded, fragments scattering into the void. The Resolute, crippled, drifted but did not fall. On the surface of the swarm construct, the final battle raged. Human Marines fought through endless corridors of black metal, rifles glowing red from heat. Eliari warriors, once fearful, now fought with the same fury, their crystal blades shining bright. Together they reached the command chamber. Inside, a vast core of pulsing energy loomed, cables and machines stretching like veins across the walls. It was the swarm's mind, its beating heart. Jex, bleeding but unbroken, lifted the final detonator. For humanity, for Eliara, for everyone. The chamber shook as the charges detonated. Light consumed everything. In space, the effect was immediate. The swarm fleets froze mid-attack. Drones powered down, ships drifted lifeless, and the endless tide collapsed into silence. The great construct cracked apart, its black surface glowing with fire before shattering into fragments that spun into the void. The swarm was broken. Silence fell across the battlefield. Human ships, battered and burning, floated among Eliari vessels, many damaged, many destroyed. Survivors whispered in disbelief. The swarm, eternal, unstoppable, was gone. On the Resolute, Mira wiped tears from her eyes. "We did it. By the stars, we actually did it." Holt sat heavily in his chair, his face pale but steady. "No, they did it. Every soldier, every ship, every life given. That's the answer we gave." When the fleet returned to Eliara Prime, the people gathered to greet them. Cities still burned. Scars still marked their world, but they were alive. And for the first time in generations, they were free from the swarm's shadow. The Eliari High Council bowed before Holt and his surviving crew. Serenia spoke with a trembling voice. "You came from a world of storms and fire, yet you chose to fight for us. We will never forget. To us, you will always be the fire that answers." Holt shook his head slowly. "Remember not us, but what we stood for. When the swarm comes again, because something always will, you must be ready. Fight and do not break." The Eliari nodded. They understood. Years later, stories of the Deathworlder fleet spread across the galaxy. Some spoke in fear, calling humans reckless, dangerous, even mad. Others spoke in awe, saying that when all others fled, it was humanity that answered the call. Among the Eliari, children learned a new lesson, carved into their histories. When the swarm came, And hope was gone, the fire from the death world rose. They did not come to conquer. They came to stand. And because they stood, we still live. That was the Deathworlder answer. Not survival, not surrender, but defiance until the stars themselves burned out. The Deathworlder fleet had won its first victory, but Captain Ryan Holt knew it was only a beginning. Saving refugees gave hope to the Eliari, but the swarm would not be stopped by small actions. It was endless, a machine tide that spread across space, consuming everything in its path. To protect Eliara Prime, they needed more than defense. They needed to strike at the heart of the enemy. The Eliari High Council hesitated at first. To them, the swarm was unstoppable. No one had ever dared enter its territory and lived. But when Holt called a meeting aboard the Resolute, his words carried the weight of a man who had already proven action where others had offered only silence. "We cannot wait here," Holt told them, pointing at the holomap. "If we stay, the swarm will gather strength and return in numbers too great for us to resist. We must take the fight into their territory, find their core, and break it." Councillor Serenya's silver eyes narrowed. "You speak of entering their zone. That is suicide." Holt's jaw tightened. "It's survival. The swarm is not magic. It's machines, and every machine has a weakness." For a moment's silence. Then Commander Jeck stepped forward, his tone blunt. "Captain, we have the data from the last raid. The swarm's movements are coordinated. That means there's a command structure somewhere." "Exactly," Holt said. "If we can locate it, even disrupt it, we can buy Eliara Prime time. Maybe more." Serenia studied him carefully, then sighed. "You humans are truly unlike any species I have known. Others flee from fire. You walk straight into it." Holt gave a faint smile. "Where I come from, fire is just another obstacle to master. The plan was dangerous. The fleet would split. Half would remain near Eliara Prime to defend the homeworld with Eliari forces. The other half, led by the Resolute, would dive into swarm-controlled space. Their mission: find the command node suspected on one of the captured colonies. When the fleet crossed the border, the void changed. Space was no longer quiet. Swarm drones patrolled everywhere, moving in cold formations, their dark hulls reflecting no light. The stars themselves seemed dimmer here, as if the swarm had swallowed not only planets but hope itself. The Deathworlder fleet did not travel quietly. They moved like hunters, leaving traps of drifting mines, scattering decoy beacons and slicing through patrols with sudden bursts of violence. Their style confused the swarm. Machines expected patterns, but humans fought like storms. Chaotic, unpredictable, wild. On the third day inside swarm territory, the fleet reached their target, a captured Eliari colony called Koresh. Once it had been a shining outpost with towers of crystal and fields of glowing plants. Now it was a graveyard. The towers were shattered, the fields burned to ash, and orbit was filled with swarm vessels. From the bridge of the Resolute, Holt stared at the ruined world. His voice was quiet but heavy. "That's what happens when no one answers a call for help." Mira swallowed hard. "Do we still go down, sir?" "Yes," Holt said. "We're not here to mourn. We're here to find answers." The fleet launched its ground teams. Dropships descended through broken skies, weaving between swarm drones. Human Marines strapped into their seats, armored in heavy suits adapted for hostile worlds. Eliari observers joined them, though their armor looked fragile compared to human designs. When the dropships landed, the teams stepped out onto the ruined soil. The air was toxic, filled with smoke and strange metallic dust, but Deathworlders adapted quickly. Their suits filtered the poison, and their movements showed no fear. The Eliari scientists who accompanied them, however, were overwhelmed. They stumbled through the ash, horrified by what had become of their colony. This was once Koresh City," one whispered. "Our gardens, our homes. All gone." "Focus," Holt reminded them. "The swarm didn't just destroy. They built something new here. Find it." The Marines advanced through the ruins. Drones emerged, their limbs sharp like blades, their eyes glowing red. The first wave fell quickly under human gunfire, but more came, crawling from the shadows of shattered towers, flying down from broken skies. The fight was brutal. Human Marines moved with deadly precision, covering each other, laying down bursts of fire and using explosives to collapse swarm tunnels. The Eliari watched in shock. To them, humans fought like predators, unflinching and relentless. One Eliari scientist whispered to another, "They do not fear the machines." "No," the other replied. "The machines should fear them." After hours of battle, the teams reached the center of the colony. There, hidden beneath the ruins, they found what they were searching for. A massive structure built of black metal, pulsing with faint red light. It was not Iliari. It was Swarm. "This is it," Commander Jex muttered. A command node. Human engineers moved forward, attaching scanners and downloading data. The machines reacted immediately. Drones surged in by the hundreds, their shrieks echoing across the ruins. "Hold the line," Holt shouted. The Marines formed a perimeter, unleashing fire into the endless tide. Explosions lit the sky. Iliari guards, though less trained, joined the defense, inspired by the humans' ferocity. Together they fought back wave after wave, buying time for the engineers. Finally, Mira's voice came through the comms. "Captain, we've got it. Data secured. Everyone fall back," Holt commanded. The teams retreated under heavy fire, dragging wounded but leaving none behind. Dropships swooped in, guns blazing, picking up the survivors before blasting into orbit. Behind them, the swarm node pulsed faster, perhaps trying to adapt, but it was too late. The Deathworlders had stolen its secrets. Back aboard the Resolute, the engineers presented their findings. The holodisplay showed lines of alien code, structures of logic and control. "It's not natural," Mira explained. "The swarm wasn't born. It was built. Long ago by some species we don't recognize. They created a machine army and lost control of it. That's why it spreads. It's following old instructions with no end." Serenya's face paled as she watched. "A weapon. Unleashed upon the galaxy. Yes," Holt said grimly. "But every weapon has a flaw. We just need to find it." The counselors exchanged uneasy looks. For them, the swarm had always been unstoppable, a storm without weakness. But humans did not see storms the same way. To humans, storms were challenges to endure, obstacles to overcome, puzzles to solve. Holt leaned over the holomap, his voice sharp with resolve. "We've cut open the beast and seen what it's made of. Now we know the truth. And that truth means one thing." Commander Jex finished the thought for him. "The swarm can bleed." The Iliari fleet, though shaken, began to believe. Refugees spread stories of Deathworlder courage. Soldiers told tales of humans holding lines against impossible odds. And now, with proof the swarm was a weapon and not an endless force of nature, hope grew stronger. But hope alone would not be enough. As Holt stood on the observation deck, watching the broken world of Koresh fade into the distance, he knew the war was far from over. They had stolen secrets, yes, but the swarm would adapt. It always did. And when it adapted, it would come for them with more fury than ever before. Still, Holt's voice carried calm determination as he spoke to his crew. "Let it come," he said. "We've walked into its territory and walked back out alive. That's more than anyone else has done. The swarm thinks it can consume everything. It hasn't met Deathworlders yet." The crew nodded, silent but fierce. In their eyes burned the same fire, the will to fight no matter the odds. For the first time in galactic history, the swarm had been wounded, and the humans were only getting started. The Deathworlder fleet returned from Koresh carrying hard-won knowledge. The swarm was not an endless mystery. It was a weapon created long ago by a forgotten race. That truth alone gave hope to the Iliari. If it was built, it could be broken. But hope always came with a cost, and the swarm was already adapting. From the windows of the Resolute, Captain Ryan Holt stared into the stars, his reflection dark in the glass. He knew the swarm would not stay quiet after their raid. It would answer, and when it did, the galaxy would learn whether humans truly belonged among the most dangerous of species. The Iliari High Council gathered once again, this time aboard the human flagship. Counselor Serenya's voice was steady, though her silver eyes revealed her fear. "You have shown us courage, Captain Holt. But the swarm learns. Already our scouts report larger fleets forming. They know you have struck their node." Holt nodded slowly. "I expected nothing less. Machines don't feel pride, but they react. If we hurt them, they'll come back stronger." Counselor Ocean frowned. "Then should we not retreat? Should we not hide and preserve what little remains?" The humans in the room exchanged sharp glances, and Commander Jex shook his head firmly. "If you hide, they will find you. If you retreat, they will chase you. The only answer is to fight until they break." Ocean's face tightened, but Serenya raised her hand. "The humans have earned their say. Let them speak their plan." Holt leaned over the holomap, his finger tracing the swarm's movements. Red zones expanded daily like ink spreading across water. They will strike Ilyara Prime soon. We cannot stop that. What we can do is bleed them, make them pay for every step. And while we fight, we look for the true core of their control. And if you fail? Ocean asked bitterly. Then at least we fail standing, Holt replied, not waiting for the end. The weeks that followed tested the humans more than any battle before. The swarm came in waves, larger and smarter than before. Where once their drones attacked in mindless floods, now they struck with precision, targeting human carriers, disabling Eliari defenses, and adapting to tricks that had once worked. In orbit above Ilyara Prime, space burned with endless clashes. Human destroyers formed walls of steel, absorbing swarms of drones while fighters screamed through the void in desperate dogfights. The Eliari ships fought alongside them, inspired by human ferocity, though their losses grew heavy. Inside the Resolute, alarms blared constantly. Mira shouted reports over the noise. Port shields failing. Engineering requests emergency power transfer. Do it, Holt barked. Explosions rocked the ship. Crew were thrown from their stations, but none gave up. Humans had always fought with the knowledge that survival was never promised. They held lines not because they expected to live, but because someone had to. On the ground, the swarm landed in greater numbers. Machines crawled across fields of crystal, burning forests and smashing cities. Human Marines and Eliari soldiers fought side by side, rifles blazing, barricades falling, and skies filled with fire. An Eliari commander named Lishan watched as a squad of humans refused to retreat even when surrounded. They used every scrap of cover, every trick, every ounce of courage to hold the line long enough for civilians to escape through underground tunnels. Lishan whispered in awe. They fight as if death does not matter. Another Eliari soldier replied, to them maybe it does not. What matters is that others live. Stories spread quickly, tales of humans dragging wounded Eliari from battlefields, of Deathworlder pilots ramming their ships into swarm carriers to buy time, of engineers repairing weapons while under fire. For every story of destruction, there was also a story of defiance. But defiance carried a heavy price. One night, after a brutal day of fighting, Holt stood in the command chamber staring at casualty lists. Entire squadrons gone, ships crippled, thousands of lives lost. He closed his eyes for a moment, letting the weight press down on him. Commander Jax entered quietly. Captain, we can't keep this up forever. The swarm is too big. I know, Holt said. His voice was steady, but his face was tired. But retreat means extinction. We'll hold until the last ship if we must. Jax hesitated, then said, there is another way. Our scouts found something. Not the main core, but a hidden world deeper in swarm territory. A secondary command hub. If we hit it hard, it could throw them into confusion. Holt turned, eyes sharp. And the risk? High, Jax admitted. We'd have to take half the fleet. Many won't return. For a moment, silence filled the chamber. Then Holt spoke the words that every human under his command already knew. Better to lose ourselves than lose everyone else. When the plan was revealed to the Eliari Council, Ocean argued fiercely against it. You would throw away lives on a desperate strike. Serenia, however, shook her head. No, Counselor. They offer us a chance. For the first time in centuries, someone fights not for themselves, but for others. I will stand with them. Her decision swayed the others. The Eliari would not stay behind. They would fight with the Deathworlders no matter the cost. The fleet prepared for the strike. Eliari refugees watched from cities and shelters as human ships lifted off once again, engines burning bright. To many, the sight was strange and terrifying. Dark vessels built for war, bristling with weapons, but to others it was a vision of hope. The Eliari whispered a new name for the humans, the fire that answers. Inside the Resolute, Holt addressed his crew before the jump. His voice was calm, but every word carried weight. We are about to walk into the jaws of the beast. Some of us may not return, but if we succeed, we give the Eliari a chance to survive. And if we fail, we prove to the swarm that Deathworlders do not kneel. The crew roared their answer. Aye, Captain. The fleet leapt into swarm space once more. The secondary hub was hidden on a barren world, a black sphere of metal buried deep beneath the surface. As soon as the humans arrived, the swarm descended on them in numbers greater than ever before. The battle that followed was chaos made real. Swarm ships poured in like rivers of steel. Human destroyers rammed through their lines, detonating reactors to tear open holes. Fighters swarmed the skies, outnumbered but fearless. Elyari ships, though fragile, pressed forward with a courage their ancestors had never known. On the surface, Marines landed again, racing against endless waves of drones. Explosions lit the night. Soldiers fought until their weapons overheated, then fought with blades, then with bare hands if needed. Elyari warriors, inspired by human madness, stood beside them, no longer running, no longer afraid. Inside the swarm hub, engineers planted explosives while Holt himself led the defense outside. His rifle spat fire, his armor scorched, but he stood tall, refusing to yield even as drones closed in from every side. "Captain," Mira shouted over the comm. "Charges set." "Then light it," Holt roared. The ground shook as the explosives detonated. The black sphere collapsed inward, glowing red before shattering into dust. Across the battlefield, swarm ships faltered. Drones froze mid-charge, and the endless tide stumbled. The humans had struck the beast again and wounded it deeper, but victory was not free. Half the fleet was gone. Thousands of soldiers never returned. Elyari cities still burned, and the swarm, though wounded, was far from destroyed. Back on Eliara Prime, Serenia looked at Holt with tears in her silver eyes. "So many lives lost, and yet without you, we would already be ashes. Why do you pay such a price for us?" Holt's face was hard, but his words were soft. "Because no one else would, and if Deathworlders don't stand, who will?" The Elyari bowed their heads in respect. They had seen the price of resistance, and they had seen who was willing to pay it. For the first time, the Elyari understood why the galaxy called humans Deathworlders. It was not just their brutal world, not just their strange strength. It was because when the universe turned to fire, humans walked into it and refused to burn. The Deathworlder fleet traveled through the void with quiet determination. Stars stretched into streaks as their ships jumped across sectors, one relay after another bringing them closer to Eliara Prime. Inside the Resolute, tension filled every corridor. Crew members sharpened tools, checked weapons, ran drills, and whispered about what awaited them. The swarm was not an enemy to underestimate. On the bridge, Captain Ryan Holt stood in silence, hands clasped behind his back, watching the holographic map. The Elyari system glowed faintly on the edge of the projection, surrounded by red zones marking swarm activity. His fleet was still 3 jumps away. "Every second counted, Captain," Ensign Mira said, breaking the silence. "Incoming message." "It's weak, but I think it's from Eliara Prime." "Patch it through," Holt ordered. The holofilters crackled before forming the figure of an Elyari woman. Her features were delicate, with silver skin that shimmered faintly under light and eyes shaped like teardrops. Behind her stood tall crystal towers glowing with dim light, and her voice carried both fear and dignity. "I am Counselor Serenia of the Elyari High Council. Identify yourselves." "This is Captain Ryan Holt of the Deathworlder fleet," Holt said firmly. "We received your SOS. We are on course to your system." For a moment's silence. Serenia blinked, clearly stunned. Around her, other Elyari leaders leaned closer to the holo, their faces filled with disbelief. "You came?" she asked softly. "Yes," Holt replied simply. Another Elyari stepped forward, older with lines etched into his silver skin. "You risk yourselves for nothing. The swarm cannot be stopped. They consumed our colonies. They will consume us. Your arrival will only add to their slaughter." Holt's eyes narrowed. "If that were true, you wouldn't have sent the signal." Serenia glanced at her counselor, then back at Holt. She studied him as if trying to understand why any species would answer when all others had refused. Finally, she said, "Then hurry. Our defenses weaken with every passing hour." The signal cut. The fleet emerged from hyperspace hours later, and the Elyari system filled their view. Eliara Prime shone like a jewel, its oceans bright blue, continents glowing with cities of crystal. Around the planet, small defense platforms struggled to maintain order. Dozens of Elyari ships floated nearby, their hulls elegant but scarred from recent battles. "Elyari fleet status?" Holt asked. Commander Jex scanned the readings. "Broken. Less than 40 ships left and half are damaged. They can't hold the swarm much longer." "Then we hold it for them," Holt said. The humans signaled their arrival. Elyari ships turned cautiously, forming loose patterns to observe. Their commanders had heard of humans, but few had seen them. To most aliens, Deathworlders were frightening stories whispered in academies and trade halls. They were called unpredictable, dangerous, even reckless. But now, the Elyari looked upon the very legends who had come to stand with them. The first face-to-face meeting took place aboard the Resolute. Serena and 2 other counselors boarded under heavy escort. Their crystalline robes shimmered as they stepped onto the human deck, their long hands folded in calm gestures. Behind them walked Eliari guards, their armor polished but clearly ceremonial. Holt met them at the docking bay wearing a plain officer's uniform. He towered over them, his frame built by a world of heavier gravity. His eyes were sharp, his face weathered. The Eliari guard stiffened, but Serena held up a hand. "Captain Holt," she greeted. "On behalf of the Eliari, we thank you for answering." Holt nodded. "We'll talk thanks when your world is safe. For now, we need to plan." They moved to the strategy chamber. A hollow table displayed swarm positions across the system. Red clusters showed enemy activity, vast groups of mechanical ships closing in from 2 directions. Serena's voice was low as she pointed. "These 2 colonies fell. Millions lost. We have refugees still trapped in orbit near Teora, but our fleet cannot break through." Holt studied the map. His officers exchanged glances. To them, this was not just tragedy. It was also an opportunity. Rescue comes first, Holt decided. Our fleet will cut through to Teora and extract the survivors. Once they're safe, we'll regroup for defense of Ilyara Prime. One of the Ilyari counselors frowned. "You speak as if it is simple." "The swarm adapts. They overwhelm everything. What makes you think you can succeed where others failed?" Holt leaned closer, his voice steady. "Because we are human. We've lived on a world that tried to kill us every day. We adapt faster than machines." The Eliari stared at him, uncertain whether to call it arrogance or courage. The mission began within hours. Human destroyers pushed forward in tight formations, while carriers launched fighter squadrons to clear paths. The Eliari fleet, hesitant at first, followed in their wake. When the swarm appeared, the void lit up with chaos. Tens of thousands of small drone ships surged like a tidal wave, firing energy blasts and ramming anything in their path. Eliari commanders gasped as the Death Worlders responded not with rigid formations but with chaos of their own. Human ships split, twisted and looped, creating patterns no machine logic could predict. They lured drones into crossfire traps, detonated mines hidden in drifting debris, and even sacrificed drones of their own. Small decoy craft that exploded at close range. The Eliari had never seen such tactics. To them, war was always a matter of precision and order. Humans fought with wildness like storms unleashed. On the bridge of the Resolute, Holt gave sharp commands, his eyes never leaving the map. "Frigates, swing around and cut off their flank. Carriers, launch decoys. Destroyers, push straight through. We need that corridor open." The Eliari ships, inspired by the sudden momentum, joined in. Together, they carved a path toward Teora. On the planet below, thousands of Eliari refugees crowded into orbiting stations, watching through shattered windows as swarm drones hammered their defenses. Their hope was nearly gone, until human ships broke through the storm of metal. The Resolute and its escorts unleashed a wall of fire, tearing apart drones, blasting swarm carriers, and pushing closer. "Refugee transports, move now," Holt ordered through open channels. "Stay behind our lines, keep tight formation." Eliari transports, sleek but unarmed, lifted off shakily. Human frigates surrounded them, shielding them with heavy fire. Refugees wept as they saw human fighters diving into swarm formations, sometimes colliding with drones just to keep them away from the transports. When the last transport cleared orbit, Holt gave the order. "All ships fall back to Ilyara Prime. Mission complete." The Death Worlder fleet withdrew, battered but victorious. Behind them, thousands of Eliari lives had been saved. In the council chamber that evening, Serena faced Holt once again. Her silver eyes glistened as she spoke. "You risked your ships, your people, for ours. You saved more than we dared hope." Holt shrugged lightly. "That's what fleets are for." "No," Serena said, her voice steady now. "That is not what fleets are for. Not in this galaxy. Most powers protect only themselves, but you came for strangers." Her words spread quickly among the Eliari. Refugees told stories of human ships shielding them, of Death Worlder Marines fighting side by side with Eliari soldiers during the retreat. The stories carried hope, and hope was something the Eliari had almost forgotten, but Holt knew better than to celebrate too soon. The swarm had only been slowed, not stopped. They would come again, stronger, and the real test had yet to begin. As he stood alone on the deck later that night, Holt looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there, the swarm's core intelligence was watching, adapting, learning. "We've woken the beast," he murmured to himself. "Now we see if humans can teach it fear."